Okay. Wait, here I am. All right. Oops. Well, I wasn't going to start for another minute anyway. So there it is. Huh? Okay. Five, four, three, two. Hey, everybody. Hey, hey, hey. Before we come up, please, please, please go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. That's the only place where I can get friends, everybody. So even though I'm streaming it on Santita Jackson, I need you to go to Santita Jackson and Friends. That's where I get friends. And I'm on Blue Sky at santitajackson.bsky.social and X at Santita J. And we are streaming on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. But let's go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. All right, everybody, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, and I need you to put your thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. That helps us with the algorithm. And let's talk about a lot today. Hey, everybody, welcome, welcome, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today in this time of tumult and in this holy season. There is hope. A lot of things that we've been talking about, a lot of issues that sometimes we push to the side. Well, they're being brought forward in this moment, and that's a good thing. Uh, we have been talking, of course, about Luigi Mangione, who is the accused killer of Brian Thompson. And so the CEO of United Health Insurance. And he's making a lot of utterances. He's saying, you know what, he had an outburst in court today. He said, look, this is unfair. You are ignoring the lived experiences of many, many people. It seems that he is going to make this about saving the people, about looking at the injustices in the healthcare system. No one is saying that murder is right. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not kill. And I will go to my grave believing that. That having been said, we're such a violent society, Reverend Dr. Jeanette Wilson, that it is sad that when someone when their lives are threatened or when they lose their lives, it tends to get our attention. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And perhaps this is an inflection point because the healthcare system in this country, it works for the health insurance industry because the executives are incentivized, particularly Brian Thompson was incentivized to turn you down. Did you know that, Reverend Dr. Jeanette Wilson? His base salary was $1 million a year. His salary went up to $10 million because of all of the coverage denials. That having been said, we've got a couple of other cases that have burst onto the scene. And because we've been looking at what happened with Brian Thompson, and as we should have, we've missed Sonia Massey. We were all devastated to see this beautiful young woman who said, I hear a prowler. And she called the police and she ended up dead. And I want to talk with you about that, Reverend Dr. Jeanette Wilson. And then you had a young man um, who was a Michael Jackson impersonator. And he was one of those entertaining figures that we see on public transportation. He was having a mental health episode in the subway in New York. And I lived in New York for many, many years. That happens a lot. And it just happens a lot everywhere you go. Well, a veteran decided to subdue him, help put him in a chokehold, and it killed him. And he was exonerated, walked yesterday. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about Sonia Massey. Her family, Reverend Dr. Jeanette Wilson, Rainbow Push, her family were asking, pleading, not to release the police officer who killed her in cold blood. They pleaded and pleaded, please do not release him. And yet they did. A pretrial release. First of all, what happened yesterday, and then I want you to walk back and tell us what happened with Sonia Massey, Reverend Dr. Jeanette Wilson, Esquire.
Good evening, Santita, and to all of your viewers and listeners. We are in a very difficult moment in history as we look at um, the problems that we face in the criminal justice system. Policing has been and still is a major problem in America. Uh, our police forces act as if they are an occupying force in many communities,
Mm.
not serving and protecting. And as a result, they treat people that come within those neighborhoods or who are walking, driving, biking, moving about in the neighborhood as if they are criminals that they are targeting.
Wait a minute, you've just said something that's struck me. When when I was a child, on the side of a of the side of a police car, Reverend Wilson was to serve and protect. Now they are known as law enforcement. There's been a change in the languaging, Reverend Wilson. I mean, now they are enforcers of the law, which, sounds a bit violent. Talk to me.
Well, and that's the thing. They are acting as if they are judge and jury. They are there to arrest and detain possible offenders, possible violators of the law. They are not to decide whether or not they in fact committed whatever crime they believe has happened. They are merely to detain those persons of interest, those people who they think are possible offenders, but they cannot be judge and jury on the street. And that's what you're having now, people who are deciding to become the jury. I decide whether a person is guilty because I'm the arresting officer. I am called to the scene to maintain order, to obtain order, and to reach a state of calm and peace, not to decide guilt or innocence. What we're seeing is very much like the vigilante days in post Reconstruction and during the what we call the. I have two children here with me. John's two children are here, and so
Mm. Well, the audience don't know who John is. John
John Mitchell.
was Reverend Jackson's chief of staff. Yes, and when I was growing up in Push, you always had lots and lots of children around. And I'm looking forward to that happening once again.
And we have these two, son and daughter, who wants to wave at you.
Okay, well,
But at
we're
any rate,
from radio. Hi, Precious.
we are living in a time where the police are not serving and protecting. They are in fact determining guilt, innocence, and punishment. So they become judge, jury, and punisher of people who may or may not be guilty of anything. When you think of Sonia Bland, what happened to her is unconscionable. She hadn't been convicted of any crime at all.
Are you talking about Sonia Massey or
Sonia Massey
Sandra? Well, I
and
mean, Sandra Bland hadn't been
Sonia
convicted of
Bland
anything either.
convicted of anything either. She's found dead. Similarly, you have a situation in Chicago where, well, two places where there were people who decided to search a private home of someone, and they find themselves dead because the police who had a search warrant, which was for the wrong person, wrong apartment, end up shooting a lady who was
Oh,
simply
Breonna Taylor down in
had
Kentucky.
no prior background. There was no reason to be in her apartment. And in Chicago, you had a lady in her apartment. Here again, the police are executing a search warrant for the wrong person, wrong place. And I mean, on television, she's unrolled in her home. She had taken a bath, and they didn't even give her a chance to put clothes on. We did meet with the superintendent, the new superintendent, and had a change of policy and procedures about issuing search warrants. But this kind of activity can only be stopped now at the local level. We have to The mayor of every city appoints police chiefs. So we have to be able to meet with the police and the mayor to talk about department procedures for search warrants, for stopping and detaining lawfully engaged residents on the streets. And so you see in Memphis patterns and practices of discrimination, patterns and practice of hostile behavior and hostile conduct. So we have to look at police departments and county sheriff departments. These police forces, county sheriffs operate in rural areas and in suburban cities. They are the police forces in those towns and rural communities. We have to begin to look at what are their rules? How are they enforcing the law? How do they deal with the law? And right now, years ago, last year, this year, we could go to the United States Department of Justice and ask them to do a federal investigation, which takes the power out of the hands of the mayor, the county, or the state. But now we got to go back to a states' rights agenda. All politics is local, and we have to make local actions to change the local decisions that are being made against our people. And that means we have to organize.
But what happened with Sonia Massey? What happened? I mean, because so much of that, well, it was caught on tape, right? And that's what was so unsettling. It was, and you saw her say to this police officer, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." She was trying to figure out what was going on. What she called because she heard a disturbance outside of her home. What happened?
Like any one of us, you could be in your home and you hear a noise that appears that somebody's trying to break and enter your place, your private abode. And so you think, I'm going to call those I pay my taxes to serve and protect, to come and check out the premises. How do I become the victim? I mean, how do I become the perpetrator when I called you? And when you come, I talk to you and try to explain to you what happens, but you see me as an offender, not as a person who may be victimized by some person trying to rob me, harm me. And so now in many communities, people do not call the police. They're afraid. Because what happened to Sonia Massey, what happened to the lady in Kentucky, I mean, it's like everywhere we look, we're treated not as victims, but as perpetrators.
But in Breonna Taylor's case in Kentucky, they entered the wrong apartment.
Yes.
And so her boyfriend thought, I mean, he was trying to protect her. He thought they were under attack.
Yes. And that's
so they tried to blame her boyfriend for defending them in the middle of the night.
Absolutely.
Sonia Massey heard a prowler, call the police, which is what you do if you think that there's someone outside who could be threatening you. And they come inside and they start interrogating her as if she's the criminal.
I'm telling you, we go from victim and within one short move to criminal. Sonia Massey, Sonia Blake, Breonna Taylor, Anjanette Young in Chicago. We are not treated as victims. Because if I'm a victim, the first thing you do is you want to calm my fears that I am being subjected to some invader of my place, assure you that I am being protected by the police. Therefore, I don't have to worry about any harm coming to me or any damage to my premises. As opposed to doing that, they go in guns blazing, weapons drawn, so that they can abuse me as if I have committed a crime in my own apartment or home. And that's why, in many instances, many people in the community do not feel comfortable calling the police, 911. They just will suffer.
Well, let me read this to you from USA Today. And the headline is, quote, I don't ever want to see him walk free, close quote. Sonia Massey supporters rally. They want Grayson detained. And Teresa Haley said she personally supported passage of the Safety Act in Illinois, especially because it allowed for no cash bail for offenders at the discretion of judges. A recent Fourth District Appellate Court unanimous opinion that would have allowed for the pretrial release of Sean P. Grayson, a former Sangamon County Sheriff's deputy charged with first-degree murder of Sonia Massey, changed her tune somewhat. It turns out he's been released, even as her parents pleaded with the court, please leave him. And he's been charged with first degree murder. And before I bring you on, Dr. Latrice, he was someone who has a very troubled past, Reverend Dr. Wilson, and he's been moved from town to town. He's been allowed to stay in the system as a police officer, even though he is violent toward people.
Well,
so talk to me. I mean, he's been charged with first degree murder. What is first degree murder? Number one,
it's murder with intent to commit murder, causing the death of another person with malice, forethought, and intent. You premeditated. You thought about it. It wasn't. Some murders are committed in the heat of passion. First degree means you premeditate. You thought about it. You know, I say, I'm going to kill you at 4:00 today. It's not, I see you and you've been pushing me and beating me and I'm responding to some moment of passion. First degree, I'm going to murder. It's like the guy that killed the guy at United Healthcare. That was premeditated murder, among other things. He's charged with a lot of crimes, but murder is one of them because he planned to kill him. He stalked, he figured out where he would go and how he would get there and how he would find him. He tracked him. That was premeditated. That wasn't, he walked in the office and had a conversation and the conversation resulted in, back and forth between the two of them. And in the heat of passion, he stabbed him or he punched him. That's the heat of passion. This man planned to kill the United Healthcare. And we could talk about that why later, but
well, I mean, is it normal practice for someone who's been charged with first degree murder to be released even when the family objects?
Well, it may be, it's in the discretion of the judge, and each court will determine under what circumstances will a person be released, because you remember, he's not found guilty. He's merely charged with murder. And so the question is, will that person flee the jurisdiction? Will that person, are we afraid that he may cause harm to any other victims in this particular case? And the judge makes that judgment based on prior profile of the person. They do a pre-sentence PSA investigation to find out, does this person have a history of violent behavior? And they go back through all of these things to determine whether or not this person should be released on bond. Now, because he was a police officer, they give much more latitude than an ordinary victim.
Even when, I mean, do you think that was the judge required to see the video of her killing?
No.
So just, and even though he has a history.
At a bond hearing, all the judge is looking at is the character of the person, the defendant.
But Reverend Wilson, he has a history of abuse.
I agree with you. And I'm saying that you have to know what judge you are before and whether or not that judge is going to rule fairly. Most bond hearings are held at odd hours, so there are very few people there. They have them early in the morning or very late at night.
Why?
Because it's convenient. You have trials during the day. So if I'm arrested at 5 p.m., by midnight or early the next morning, I am brought before a judge for bond hearing. And they don't have any information too much. Many judges don't even ask for anything. That case, he should have asked for a background on the police. He merely ruled because he's a police officer, he let him out. on bond.
You know what? Let me bring up Dr. LaShawn Latrice. She, of course, is part of the group Make Noise for Change, but she also is a community psychologist. So talk to me about this case, because this is a case that, of course, it happened downstate in Illinois, but it's a case that has taken on national significance, and certainly it ignited people in Chicago, because this is just a few hours away from us, and it was in our state, in the state's capital. Um, what do you make of this case? I mean, you have this man's, you have Sonia Massey's father pleading, do not release him. I can only imagine what the family would feel if they see him walking around Springfield or around the area.
Absolutely.
I mean, I can only imagine. I mean, that's almost a taunting to see someone, and because we saw the video, and the video, it was very clear that he was hostile to her. And Bernadette said he was possessed of a demonic spirit. She said,
Mm.
she said 3 times, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. And on the third time, he shot her, he killed her. So, I mean, talk to me. I mean, and help me as a psychologist understand this.
Well, so first of all, he did represent an officer who was extremely unhinged. Um, from the video, from the very beginning, he came in a very defensive manner, which I think she maintained her composure pretty well considering the circumstances. But I also think that when people don't know or not familiar with what something means, the trauma that they're dealing with causes them to react. Because remember, he had a partner there with him that was kind of talking him back and trying to convince him to take a few steps back. And in the course of that, even though she was complying, she was still deemed as dangerous to him. And I don't know if it was more so that she spoke what she spoke when she spoke that was intimidating, but the entire event could have been extremely just it could have been avoided, because when you think about someone who's calling the police because they are afraid or they hear some noise, and whatever the case may be, even if there was a mental issue there, it did not pose a threat to him. And so for him to respond and react the way in which he did, and then with the carelessness that he did after he took the shots, it just really was a cause to pause. And what it showed me was we have to always be on a pivot when it comes to these type of situations, because you just never know when and where something like this could happen, where it gets escalated for nothing, because she basically was shot because she was dealing with the wrong officer at the wrong time, not because she made the wrong move. She didn't do anything wrong. People often say prayers, they say affirmations, they call on Jesus, they do certain things. That is not intimidating, that's not threatening, and that's no reason to be killed. But to see how that entire event went down, and we participated in a number of actions, and what we tried to do was to just support the family in any way possible. But what we did witness was we felt like the support that comes in for the officer ends up weighing more than a life that was taken. And so it was almost like her life wasn't valuable enough for people to see that part in the humanity side. They saw the officer side, and people often have compassion and they come to the defense of the officer. And I think had the governor not said what he said, I don't know if he would have been fired after that.
What did the governor say?
He said that there was no excuse for the behavior that was witnessed on that video, and he spoke against how the officer reacted, and he said it in such a firm way that shortly after that, then the police chief came forth and he did release the officer from the force. But initially, there was a whole bunch of support that was happening that was coming from that officer's captain.
But I still think he's got a lot of it. I mean, I'm still trying to Reverend Wilson figure out how it is that that the family that the family asked that the officer not be released prior to trial, and yet their wishes were completely disregarded. Reverend Wilson, I mean, is that the normal
That is,
course of action?
the family does not get to determine whether a defendant will be released on bond or not. That is within the purview of the judge sitting on that case, um, or the judge that does the bond hearing. And sometimes the judges that do the bond hearing are not even assigned to the case; they're just sitting in bond court. Every city has bond court. That judge only has one thing before them: any information on the defendant. Now, people can go to bond court if they know when that case is going, when that person will be brought before a judge, and they can object and give some testimony or evidence. They, giving it to the news media will not help them.
Hmm. Dr. Latrice, how does this impact the community? And Chaparral Wells, everybody make sure your phones are muted. Chaparral Wells said they knew her and that she suffered from mental illness. He was speaking down to her, that is the police officer, the entire time. He told her to take the pot off the stove. Then he said he was going to throw, and and then he said that she was going to throw it at him, and she was not. She looked at him like, "My goodness." We saw this play out on tape, and
Yes.
it just it just seems to me there's just arbitrariness here. It's just
And
But that's
what
that is what
what
happened in this criminal. I'm sorry, in this
that's okay.
criminal justice system that we have. It's not justice. It is arbitrary. They probably did know her, and they felt that they are the, the court erred on the side of the lawyer, not on the side of the victim. They treated her as if she were the perpetrator of a crime, when in fact she was the victim in that instance.
she wasn't
And
treated
not
right.
only that,
Still
but
being
we're
treated.
not even
Still being violated once again.
absolutely. Not only that, but what about the trauma that comes with her family having to witness her being shot to death on a video? What about the trauma of her children having to witness their mother thinking that she called someone to protect her and to help her, and it turned out to be the opposite? Look at how this trauma just continues to just have a domino effect on everything and everyone around us. When we think about all of the different murders that we've witnessed just in the past 4 years, when you think about those things never leave. It doesn't leave our minds. It doesn't go away. It almost feels like when something else happens, it's like you just know that there's something that's going to be worse than that last event. And when we think about the trauma associated with that, I think it's disheartening for people to think that people could just see that and carry on like nothing ever happened. My kids saw it. When they saw it, the first thing they said was, "Mama, how did that happen?" And I'm saying to them, you can never get into the mind of an officer, but you have to remember there is this thing called qualified immunity that we've been fighting against for a very long time. And these situations, they just amplify the need to continue to fight even harder against it.
I think that you're absolutely right. And most people don't deal with police until there's a crisis for them personally. We have not dealt with how do we want the police to respond? What kind of orders should they be given? When we find a police officer that has a history and pattern of misconduct, we should make sure they can never go work on any police force ever again. They have mental illness problems. When you in the military, you have to have what is called R&R.
Well, I mean, something didn't happen with this guy because guess what? He has had problem after problem after problem. He has been moved from, and you see this with the police. They do this. They do this. This is their standard practice for
They
them.
move you from one police jurisdiction to another one where
And they don't miss a beat.
They don't miss a beat. They don't miss a check. Remember the one that Congressman Jonathan Jackson, John Byrd, he
The lieutenant commander here in Chicago.
never lost his pension.
Well,
Never.
would you just briefly tell us who, for people, because a lot of people who are listening are not from
He was the
Chicago.
commander in Chicago in the police department that tortured defendants. When you were arrested, you were tortured by John Byrd. So you had
Men were raped with cattle, and boys were raped with cattle prods and
prods, electric shocks to men's testicles, causing them to confess. If you are being abused and beaten, you'll confess to anything just to stop the torture. He caused torture for years on multiple defendants over the years, and it wasn't until we started with the Innocence Project and Congressman Jackson every Saturday he would talk about John Byrd's defendants, people that were released after 40 years of being in jail, having been convicted and sentenced, would come to push and tell their story. It was just amazing. And so this happens in police districts across the country. 2 or 3 bad apples cause problems for everybody. I am sorry, I'm going to have to leave, Santita.
But thank you so much. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Wilson.
I'm so
Sending you sending you so much love. Appreciate you. But do you know what is the fallout on this? I mean, because at the end of the day, this to me is very dangerous because you're afraid to call the police. You shouldn't be afraid to call the police, but you are. And they have shown, even in an era in which we are videotaping. I mean, they're supposed to wear body cams, but a lot of people have video. We live stream things on Facebook, on X, on just all manner of platforms, and even when there's videotape evidence, it doesn't matter. I mean, even when someone's parent, you killed my child. It's first degree. He's not been charged with second degree murder. Manslaughter, no. First degree. He walked into her home and he had intended to kill her, and he did that.
Mm-hmm.
And he has been given. He is now walking about the community, and that to me, Dr. Patrice, that's very dangerous, and that's just my opinion.
And when you think about it, the trauma, you're going to pass by the person who murdered your daughter. That doesn't make any sense at all. The mere fact, as even Reverend Dr. Wilson said, they don't necessarily take the family into consideration, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at some measure, they have to think about the trauma that's inflicted upon the people who lost their child, the children who lost their mother, and how they could be walking around at a grocery store and they run across this gentleman. I can't phantom that. And I know in the community where I was raised, I don't know how that would be perceived if a known killer, someone who had murdered someone, would be free to walk around. And I know we live in a world where, a lot of the municipalities are protected, but that's why it's so imperative to put databases in place so that officers, once they're found to do things that are against the role of protection and serving, once they start doing those things, they create a database where they can't just bounce to the next municipality. We have to make sure that these people are noted, that they can never be an officer again. You shouldn't get another opportunity to kill someone else, and you've already done 10 other things that you've gotten away with. And then I always talk about, Santita, how the system is not designed to work for us in any capacity. It's not broken. It's functioning just how it was designed to function.
Absolutely. I mean, these were slave catchers. And
Yes.
while it's been racialized, the fact is, the most vulnerable, what happens to the most vulnerable, it moves up the food chain. And so this is, while it's racialized, eventually it bleeds out and it impacts everybody. That's why
Yeah.
when you have these marches against police brutality, everybody's marching because people who have power tend to abuse the power that they have.
Yep.
So, I mean, what's your final thought here?
My final thought is, as a community, I hope we take heed to what we've been seeing, what's been televised, what's been placed on social media, the videos, and when they push the municipalities to release these tapes, these dash cams and body cams, I hope we don't wait until something happens to us personally. If we haven't had that personal experience, maybe we shouldn't wait for that to happen. We should be proactive and we should be standing up. If you're not a person that does marches, don't march, but you can get on the phone, you can call your local congressman, you can call the local politician, you can help craft legislation. You can even go down to lobby on behalf of some of these failed policies. But what we need to do is unite, stay united more, and not wait to be such reactionary type people. I don't want to be caught just waiting on something to happen. I would rather be standing with my brother or sister or family, hoping that we can stop someone else from losing their life at the hands of a negligent law enforcement official. Because when it's all said and done, they get a chance to walk away unscathed. Many of them, they get GoFundMe's, they're raising money while they're off work. People are fighting for them. But what happens to that family that's been impacted? Nobody
Well,
really thinks about that.
well, no, well, hold on. What does happen to the family? I'm asking you.
Families fall apart off of things like this. I mean, it's the damage is astronomical. You're talking about a mother and father who's lost their child. You're talking about children who have lost their mother. You're talking about a community who's impacted by someone they see every day and they know they did not deserve to be killed. Now, what happens with all of that? It creates rage, anger, sadness, depression, anything you could possibly think of. There's a full range of emotions that, and all of those people coupled with the community impact, it turns almost into an implosion because
What do
we
you mean
feel like
implosion? How does an implosion manifest?
if things continue to compile upon each other, then the community erupts at some point, and it's almost like you can't come and contain it now because it's gotten to the point that we let it go too long. And so that implosion is, I'm saying, from inside the community, people are exploding because now no one wants to deal with officers. Nobody wants to call the police. Just like you said, I've seen this happen over and over again. We have a cardinal rule amongst me and my peers. We unequivocally don't call the police. It has to literally be somebody out there, life or death, something that's in front of us. But as far as we're concerned, we're not calling the police. If somebody gets into a little minor argument, oh no, we're not calling the police because we
Well,
don't know how that's going to end. Look what happened to Betty, and Quintonia Legris. Same
mhm.
place. She just opened the door and she died. That's that's unfathomable. I couldn't even imagine. When I saw that story, I was so outdone. I just could not even imagine. Here's someone having a mental health crisis and somebody thinking, let me let them in so they could help. No way. So my thing is, we have to recognize that if we don't challenge these failed policies, put an end to qualified immunity, and even though we're fighting down in Springfield to do that, we have a rally coming up on the 12th. We're fighting to do that. There are some public officials, elected officials, that can push forth these same things, and we don't have to fight as hard. But you ask yourself, Santita, why aren't they doing it now?
Well, why
Are
aren't
they
they?
waiting for something to hit home personally for them? Because they certainly are not taking the lives of these people being killed serious enough to enforce those type of policies, because I don't think that this is something we should be begging for. That's why I'm like, it's time for people to really like rise up and understand their true value and their true strength collectively. And we have to fight. We have to be prepared to fight. And we can't just buckle at the first thing that's thrown our way.
Dogs and Latrice, when you talked about the implosion, and you talked about the implosion in our communities, does that also happen within our homes? Because
Yes.
you know, the old expression, you always hurt the ones you love. Because this kind of pain, it's got to go somewhere,
Yes.
right? I mean,
Yes.
I'm not a psychologist, you are. But
And you're absolutely right. When you think about the traumatic impact, right? You're talking about communities, you're talking about families, but what happens before those families roll out into the community? There are issues that have to be dealt with right at home. When those issues are not addressed or dealt with, they implode and they end up right in the communities. And that's why, as a community psychologist, I always say we are choosing to look at theoretically and research wise what has happened to this individual over time that systemically has impacted them to cause them to get to this point right here in their lives. It's not the blame game. It's just the opposite. They are victims of their circumstances and victims of what has been implicated on our community for years. And people are just not willing to always call it out for what it is, but we've been strategically put in certain positions. And unfortunately, the impact is it hits us before it hits anybody else. And we're always the ones that end up on the other side. And I don't like the fact that everybody wants us always to just kind of turn the other cheek. No, at some point we got to stop or we're going to all be gone. I mean, we can't afford to just continue acting like we're not affected by these things.
well,
We are.
we're deeply affected. I mean, Black people are forgiving people, but we're also an excusing people. Because if we were forgiving, you'd have much more peace.
Yes.
If when I say we're excusing, we give the people who offend us, who hurt us, a pass, and then we hurt each other. So when people I mean, black on black crime, that's a misnomer, and white on white crime, people kill and hurt people they're close to, and we lead lives that are intra-racial. That is, black folks live with black people mostly, white people live with white people mostly, and mostly they hurt each other. The murder rates for blacks and whites it's roughly the same from the mid 80s to just above 90. So somewhere almost 90%. That is what we do. I'm not making excuses. I'm just simply saying that we've got to look at how the trickle down effect, because I can only imagine that, and we will talk about Mr. Neely, the killing of Mr. Neely tomorrow, everybody. But I want to wrap this up because I don't think, when I look at what's happening with Luigi Mangione, the young man who is accused of killing, who's been charged with killing Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Health. When you dig down into his background, he has had a profound injury. He's got steel pins in his back. He had a horrific injury because he was surfing. And apparently he's had a very, very, very difficult recovery. But he's also someone who is from a privileged background, who has had a chance, and he's lived on a privileged perch. So he sees some things. And sometimes it takes that's what, when you see some people from a place of privilege, say they don't just glory in the privilege. They say, wait a minute, this isn't right. No one is saying that you should kill anybody. Oh, no, that's wrong. But I just had John Canham Klein from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, and from the Health and Stealing Substack, Health and Stealing.
Mm.
And he said, United's healthcare has killed a lot of people without firing a gun. When you deny people coverage, when you delay coverage, when they've got to take the generic medicine as opposed to the brand medicine that the doctor prescribes for you, the generic medicine is someone we know who's given generic medicine, and the impact on her was quite negative and it killed her eventually. I mean, so we've got to look at this. I'm thinking about Sonia Massey's father, who I just read a People magazine article about him. And he's devastated. He said, I asked them, just, I'm sure for his own, just to give him a sense of peace, to see this man walking around would make you crazy. I would think. You tell me. Well, how would that make someone feel?
I can imagine not only is he hurt,
I mean, say that to me as a psychologist.
angry, pissed off. Okay, back to my hat.
No.
He's devastated. He's mortified. I mean, and not only that, but could you imagine the feeling of wanting to get revenge, that this neighborhood, this family, people are in their minds going, if I see him, I'm going to do blue, blue, blue. People don't understand. You're not thinking like that. You're thinking as a person who is hurt, and you feel like you got to get justice one way or the other. And to see the killer be able to walk free amongst everyone else, and your daughter is buried and gone, that right there is just, it's unreal to fathom someone having to encounter that. And it's not a lot of people that will let that roll up off of them like that. They're gonna feel some need to react, some need to feel like they've protected something. It's almost like a father, my father, God rest his soul, my father would not let things go. And Santita, when I was in second grade, I built a go-kart. I participated in a race down Lincoln Park Hill. I never forget it. And I won first place. And I never forget, I took pictures with the paper. And right after I took the pictures, they said, we got a recall. And my dad was there. And my father was like, huh? And they said, there are barbells in her wheels. Now, mind you, I built the go-kart at the park district. The wheels were given to me by the park district, shop teacher. Mm-hmm. I didn't know anything about a barbell, but they tried to take that trophy back. My father was like, no way. She worked hard for this. She has done all these things. You are not taking my baby girl's trophy. But I mean, to see how upset he was, I laugh about it now because I was just a kid. But my father was serious. Like, so could you imagine it was something worse than that? He was furious. He was like, no way. She's a little girl. She doesn't know anything about wheels with barbells. Someone gave her those wheels. Oh, it was just a mess. But it makes me think about the love that we have for our children and how that enrages us when we think something unjust has happened to them. So we could just imagine for 2 seconds, if you got a child, a niece, a nephew, a mother, a father, what you would do to make sure that they are safe. And what would you do if something happened to them unjust? You wouldn't let it go. You wouldn't let it rest. And that's how I feel.
I mean, Chaparral said, and she lost her son. Many of you know this. And she said, I will say that the day my son died, part of me died. This is what this father's dealing with. And the family. And she said, yes, the implosion happens within the home. Some families fall apart and some get closer, but no one is ever the same. And that's what I'm thinking about. And as we're looking at, I mean, there's just so much that's before us right now, Dr. Latrice. I mean, we're talking with Dr. LaShawn Latrice, community psychologist. And of course, community activists and organizers make noise for change, and we do need to do that. And I see the explosion, if you will. I only have a couple minutes left with Luigi Mangione, Mangione, who said This is so unfair. You all are not paying attention to the lived experiences of people. Yeah, because folks get turned down. I mean, the base salary of Brian Thompson from United Healthcare is $1 million a year, but he made $10 million last year. That $9+ million was made because of policies that were implemented that denied people coverage.
Mm-hmm.
John Canham Klein, from his Healing and Stealing Substack, gave us that information. Very, very hard to find. Can you imagine? His base salary, 1 million, but he gets 9 million more from denying you coverage. And so we're seeing a lot of people get very upset. And we're seeing, even when we look at the Trump effect, if you will, he said it's completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people, his lived experience. He's talking about he is angry with this health insurance industry, and he is not alone. That's why a lot of folks, I said yesterday, I said, you all, I mean, and you're dealing with someone, what we don't recognize with some people like a Robert Kennedy, even a Donald Trump, this young man, I mean, they come from different places politically, but you tend to see people who come from privilege, they have a different view of things. They can. People who have nothing, people who have everything, they kind of are like two sides of the same coin, different sides of the same coin. They're like, you know what? I've seen it all, and I've seen nothing. And I want to tell you, I've been to the top of this mountain, and it ain't no there. And I want you to know, I'm looking at you all from the bottom up, and I'm seeing up your skirt. I'm seeing up your pants. This isn't right. There's a lot that's off here. And I think that for this man to beg you, to plead with you, pleading with you, please don't release this man. This is too painful for my family. And people have been marching in Springfield. You know that. And for him to be ignored, I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. No, you don't care? They don't care. They don't care. So, your final word for us today, because a lot of people, and this is a time of year where everybody is really, really feeling it. Your feelings are amplified over the holidays. What you have and what you don't have, it's amplified. Your joy, your sorrow, it's amplified. What's our takeaway with this particular case? The woman, and I think what hit us all was that when she looked at him and said, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. I mean, and everybody I know said, mm. And she said it 3 times, and he walked over to her and shot her and killed her.
Mm.
And you put someone like that back on the streets? Are you serious? Dr. LaShawn Latrice, you have the final word here.
Well, Santita, my heart goes out to that entire family,
Oh my God.
because if she was able to look at those officers and that particular officer caused her to make that statement, I could only think that she saw something that we couldn't see. And she knew she needed to be protected, and she called out to be protected. And the reaction from it was that of a demonic nature. And
Yeah.
it was not, um, it was no cause for it. But the bad part is you cannot bring her back. But he wants to be out in the public, and he wants people to actually believe that this was not what was intended to happen. I just find that hard to believe. And I hope that we can get to a place where we start holding people accountable right where they stand, and that we follow through on these things, and we don't just let the hype of something cause us to stand up, but that we continue to fight once those cameras go away, because that family's going to have this burden for the rest of their lives.
And
So
that community, her neighbors,
the
everybody.
community, the neighbors, the least we could do is continue and keep consistently fighting against these type of acts.
Dr. LaShawn Latrice, everybody, community psychologist. Thank you so much for being with us today. There's a lot to talk about and a lot for us to think about, really. Everybody sending you so much love. Next show that we're going to talk about in part uh, what's happening in the Middle East, this expanding war in the Middle East. It's growing and growing and growing. And now, in the middle of all of that, as we're looking at what's happened with Brian Thompson, may his family know comfort and love and healing for the family of the alleged killer, because this this Christmas won't be the same without him. This is an awful time for everybody. Sonia Massey's family, Jordan Neely's family, on and on and on and on. A lot of people in a lot of pain. Netanyahu, who has been charged with war crimes, he is now on trial domestically for corruption. He actually had to testify yesterday. How might that impact him internationally or domestically? We're going to talk with Dr. John Quigley about that. And there's so much to talk about. We're going to keep on talking about it here on the Santita Jackson Show. Got one more hour for you, everybody. And I have Cornell West tomorrow for 2 hours. Yes. Can't wait to talk to the great Reverend Dr. Cornell West, talk about his presidential campaign and everything else. We got a lot going on here on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just, well, AM 950 Radio, the next show. That's right. For those of you, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. God bless you, everybody. And for those of you who want to check us out to talk about Netanyahu and what's happening in the Middle East, come on, everybody. Come on over. Come on over. But we just closed off the show for now. So let me get on over because I got somebody waiting. Sending you so much love, girl.
Bye-bye.